Dr. Aaron Kaufman join us on our Zoom meeting. And let me just introduce Dr. Kaufman here. He is a board-certified osteopathic family practitioner. He's practiced integrative family medicine in Albuquerque, New Mexico for 32 years. He is currently in the 4th integrative practice that he has started and ran in Albuquerque. He integrates the best of Western medicine with many different healing practices, including nutrition, herbs, homeopathics, human identical hormone therapies, injections that rebuild damaged ligaments, manipulative therapies, and soon IV nutrition and chelation. He has been using redox cell signaling products in his practice for over 5 years. He has extensive experience with these products, having put hundreds of his patients on these amazing molecules. He gives regular weekly talks on this disruptive breakthrough technology. Welcome, Dr. Kaufman, and I know that you are so busy and have had an amazing, incredible day today, and we're so excited to have you here with us.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Can you just share with us all of your expertise? We're so excited to hear your experience with ASEA and how you use it in your practice.
Just all at once in one sentence? Or...
Yep, just go. You have about 30 minutes, and then it's going to cut us off and kick us out.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I was introduced to ASEA by a doctor friend about 6.5 years ago, and I had a pretty heavy-duty resistance to doing network marketing because of bad experiences in the 80s and the 90s. When, you know, everybody would bring me the latest, greatest juice and antioxidant, and, you know, I would just say, is it network marketing? They would say, yeah, and I would say, absolutely not, you know, and I was very serious. And for 15 years, I was just tired of all the hype and the, you know, the false representations and so forth. And so I, you know, wouldn't even consider looking at them. And Dr. Edmonds brought me ASEA and told me about it. And I said, is it network marketing? She said, yes. And I made a little cross sign at her and said, no, absolutely not. And I was serious. And she was very smart. She kept giving me research articles. And you know, she knew I'd been a runner for many, many years. I've been running since I was 21, and I'm 64 now. And I live in Cedar Crest, New Mexico, up above Albuquerque at 7,000 feet. And I run up through the Cibola National Forest up to 8,000 feet, and had at that time been running these same trails for 16 years. And she's giving me research articles that are really well done, you know, double-blind placebo-controlled studies and so forth that show that athletes using these products go 12% further before they hit their ventilatory threshold, the wall, the runner's wall. They run out of air, basically. And when I'm going up to 8,000 feet, I do that at 8 different places. I've got my arms up over my head, and I'm, you know, and if I miss a breath, I'm going to fall over. And so this really made an impact. Going 12% further was pretty profound. And she gave me mouse studies that showed that mice would run 29% further before they were exhausted, and metabolic studies that demonstrated that there were these huge metabolic shifts in the precursors and the intermediaries to Krebs cycle, which is our energy production cycle, within 15 minutes of drinking these molecules. And it got my attention. By hook and crook, I started drinking it. Within a month, I'm powering up the mountain harder and faster and further. And within 3 months, right before I turned 60, I set new personal best times for those trails I was running for 16 years at that time, 20 years now, almost 21. And, you know, that got my attention. And within 4 months, I'm sleeping like I hadn't slept in 25 years and still do 5 years later. One thing after another stopped hurting. So I started sharing it with patients. Well, to be honest, I should back up a step. You know, I said to her, I realized I'm going to have to drink this the rest of my life. And I was almost exasperated because I don't think I wanted it to work. And I was feeling so good. And I said, this is not cheap. And she said, she looks at me and she says, well, if you tell 6 people, yours will be paid for. And I groaned, but I went out And I started talking to people, patients, family, friends, so forth. And it took about a week and a half to get it paid for. And I've been using it with just hundreds and hundreds of patients since then. And there's this sort of uniform response. You know, we know from the early studies that everybody's, you know, is having these metabolic shifts within 15 minutes of drinking their first dose. And, you know, what hits me, Lorianne, is that, you know, that was what they chose to look at because they were looking at athletics, and somebody thought to, I don't know if it was Dr. Samuelson or who thought, oh, well, let's look at these metabolic shifts in Krebs cycle. But, you know, good and well, and the same thing with the gene studies. We looked at 5, you know, signaling genes, and we have like 30,000. So you figure all these things are happening that we don't know about. But you know, it's not just what we happen to look at. But anyway, it tells us that within 15 minutes, all these huge metabolic changes are happening. And sure enough, you know, everybody who was drinking it, and some quicker, as you all probably on the call know, it's a very, very individual thing how people respond. But over time, some sooner, some later, everybody and sooner or later sleeps better. And it's very interesting. I guess we're supposed to be compliant, say discomfort instead of pain, but everybody gets out of discomfort over time. And a significant number of people get out of excruciating discomfort. But I've seen that fairly uniformly. But what really hooked me is there are things, I do integrative medicine as Laura described. And I've seen a lot of amazing things that you don't see in mainstream medicine, or probably even in, you know, a lot of alternative practices as well. I started seeing things that you just don't see in mainstream or alternative medicine with this. And I was graced early on, probably about my 3rd month of drinking this. I was running home from the, you know, being up at 8,000 feet. And I ran past my neighbor's house, who is a woman who had a brain injury. And I didn't realize that her husband had a brain injury too. And I don't know if you want to hear it now. I can talk to you about it if you want.
We would love to hear. Love.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's, you know, probably one of the most profound stories in all ASEA. At any rate, she had come to me a year and a half earlier. Even though she was my neighbor, she was also a patient. And she had 7 years earlier been in a car accident where she had an injury to her brain stem. And she lived in nonstop, over-the-top pain from the top of her head to the bottom of her feet. It hurt her to chew. She couldn't get her sentences out. She couldn't, you know, speak clearly. Or, as she said, her words would run into each other. And she would fall down. If she turned too suddenly, she had to use a cane, couldn't walk more than 100 feet. Most days she would lie in bed for 18 hours staring at the paint and only sleep about 2. She was miserable. It hurt her to chew. And this was 7 years. She'd been to see 23 doctors before she came to see me. And all those things that you described, Laurie, I took a look at her and I went, well, this woman's going to get better. And we did adjustments on her head and did injections in her neck to stabilize the injury. We cleaned up her diet. We got her on iodine and thyroid and human hormones and all, and she would get a little better and a little worse. And for a year and a half, she just languished. And, you know, she was a, quote, a failure. And so she saw me running by her house, and I said, you should try this stuff. And she figured she had nothing to lose. So she gets on it, and I don't see her for 3 weeks. And the next time I see her, she does not have her cane. I didn't tell you this. She's on huge amounts of pain medicines and muscle relaxants. They really don't help. Anyway, so I see her in 3 weeks. She doesn't have her cane, and she is talking coherently to 2 people. She couldn't speak more than a sentence or 2 before. And she was off a lot of her meds already. I was in tears. I'd never seen anything like that in my life.
Wow.
And she continued to get better and better. And to this day, she's sharp, and ASEA has given her life back. Now, that would be amazing enough, but I didn't realize it. I thought her husband was just kind of surly, because if you ask him a question, he wouldn't say anything. He would just maybe grunt or walk away. I didn't realize he was 63 at the time. And I didn't realize that 23 years earlier, he had been a bank vice president in Seattle. And at age 40, he was playing indoor soccer after work. And at the end of the game, he dropped dead. And he was down for 9 minutes before they resuscitated him, which, if you have any medical background, you know that's too long. So for the next 23 years, he watched reruns. He had an anoxic brain injury. You know, his brain had been without oxygen too long. And he was not much use. And he would, you know, we were up at 7,000 feet, and he would walk the dogs. He's a heart patient. He would have to stop on the hills. I found all this out after the fact. So he starts drinking ASEA, and he's not having to stop on the hills anymore. Same thing that allows, you know, an athlete to push, you know, 12% further before they run out of air, lets heart and lung patients carry more oxygen as well. And that was one of the first things I started doing in my practice, you know, and sure enough, people's oxygen saturations would improve, and they could go further. And, you know, anybody on the spectrum of, you know, athlete to sedentary heart lung patient does better because they carry more oxygen and they don't fatigue as quickly. But anyway, so this gentleman is not stopping on the hills, but he's still not real functional, you know, mentally, emotionally. The wife is doing so well. She goes to visit their daughter in LA and leaves him on his own. And she says, "You double your dose." So he doubles his dose, and 4 days later, he calls her on the phone and he says, "The fog has lifted." And she goes, "Who is this?" She doesn't recognize his voice. But even as I'm saying this, it makes my hair stand up still. After 23 years, this man woke up. And he's sharp as a tack, has taught me stuff on the computer. He's funny. So, you know, for me, that was divine orchestration. You know, it's like what hit me is, okay, if in the rest of my entire life, if there's one more story like this, I have to tell people about this, because I can't not tell somebody who it might make this much difference for. And the reality is, you know, that's those two together are a pretty dramatic story. But the reality is, we see a story of that caliber, in my own experience, probably every 3 to 4 months. And if you listen to the charge up calls every day, you probably hear 1 or 2 a month, or, you know, every week or two, you hear an amazing story. And you hear tons of stories that are just like, yeah, you know, they got their, you know, energy back. They sleep better. They don't hurt as much, you know, that sort of thing. So that's what got me started. And I've been using it in my practice ever since, and with whoever needs it or deserves to know about it. Were there specific things you guys wanted to know about?
Tell us a little bit about when you share it with your patients. How do you suggest to them that they use it? How do you present it to them?
Well, it's just like anything else, and like anybody else. Specific to my practice, somebody comes in and they tell me whatever they tell me, and I do the workup and so forth. And in developing a treatment plan for them, you know, I almost always, it has something to do with nutrition, and it may be medication. And, you know, when it seems appropriate, I'll just, you know, it's one more thing, Lorianne, in my armamentarium. You know, I may say you need vitamin D, or you need hormones, or you need a medication, or, you know, or you need to be using redox signaling molecules. And, you know, and each thing I talk to people about, I tell them why. And so I'll give them a description. So it's just one more thing, you know, that I recommend for people. It just happens to be the most amazing thing, you know, the thing that makes the most difference in the most levels, you know.
So how do you feel like it has helped you personally besides being able to run?
Oh my gosh, just being able to sleep through the night and not, you know, be up at 1, 2, 3 in the morning for a couple hours is just pure grace. You know, I've had a lot of injuries since over the last 5 years, so I hurt a lot. But when I wake up in the middle of the night and my shoulders are killing me and so forth, and I rub the gel on, and 5 minutes or so, they don't hurt anymore, I can go back to sleep. I mean, that's pretty heavy duty stuff. And I, you know, wake up and my shoulders or my back or, you know, hips or whatever are hurting. And, you know, I'm kind of walking crooked for, you know, a few minutes, and I rub this on after my shower. And, you know, by 5, 10 minutes later, I'm feeling great. I don't hurt. I'm limber. I can either go to work or go for a run or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, you know, and mental clarity and on and on and on. And even, you know, I'm losing a lot of hair here, but I rub the gel on and it's not going away as fast.
You gotta love that. We all want to
Yeah,
keep our hair.
yeah. I say to people, you know, early on, people were telling me they were getting off thyroid and their hair was getting dark and they were growing hair and they were losing weight. And I would go, that's great, not me. You know, I'll take the things it brings me. That's fine, but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
it hasn't helped me with this. Well, actually, now that I'm rubbing the gel on my head, it actually is thickening up my hair a little bit.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So now that you bring that up, can you explain to everybody a little bit? Because there's, you know, people that are brand new on this call that
Oh yeah. Mhm.
want to know, how does ASEA work? Like, what is it doing inside our body?
Sure. Cool. Well, you know, I'll give you sort of the nutshell version that I tell patients, you know, and it, you know, it varies with each person I'm talking to, depending on what their level of understanding and their need and so forth is. But the bottom line is, what I tell people, and I'll tell you guys, is ASEA, uh, the products, the Redox products we have, the serum, the advanced serum, the Renew 28 gel, and ASEA Redox cell signaling supplement are redox signaling molecules, and they are human identical. You are making them inside of every cell in your body nonstop, and you produce them in tiny, tiny fractions of a second with enzymes. And it's a byproduct of the energy production cycle called Krebs cycle inside your mitochondria, which are these little energy factories that, you know, produce ATP and allow us to do everything we do. They turn on every process in every living cell. You don't blink your eyes, you don't grow hair, digest your food, hear what I'm saying, except that it's being turned on or turned off by these redox signaling molecules. And when we're little children, we produce tons of these. And so, you know, there's a schoolyard across from my treatment rooms, elementary school. And at recess every day, there's 200-300 kids out there, and there's constant motion. They're swinging and they're running and falling down, and, you know, there's just motion. And I tell people, if there was a bunch of people our age over there, they'd be standing around or sitting. And that's the difference. That's redox signaling molecules. When we're children, we make tons of them. Starting at puberty, we make less and less and less. And they cause our cells to work efficiently. So as we age, our cells don't work efficiently. As Dr. Samuelson, who stabilized these molecules, said, our cells become senescent, means senile. And so they're just sitting there not doing their job, not doing things like recognizing damage and repairing it, not recognizing abnormal cells and killing them off. You know, it's called apoptosis, and they're not regenerating as well. And it's because of a deficiency of these redox signaling molecules. If you don't take care of yourself, you don't get exercise, you eat American food, you make less and less. God forbid you have some disease process like diabetes or lupus, or you've been run over by a truck, you make less and less and less. And ASEA products, cell signaling supplement, the Renew 28 and the serum, is the first time anybody ever figured out how to make these molecules identical to what we produce outside of our body and stabilize them, which is pretty amazing because in our body, we produce them in tiny fractions of a second and consume them, utilize them in tiny fractions of a second. So they come and are used and are gone quicker than you can blink. And so for them to be able to stabilize these so that they're, you know, viable a year and a half after they're produced is pretty amazing. But this is the first time anybody's ever done this, so we can actually replenish these molecules. And therefore, when people ask me, does this treat cancer? Does this treat diabetes? And my answer is the same as Dr. Samuelson's is, does it involve a cell? Because this turns on cells, it youthens cells to be able to do what they did, let's say 20 years ago. That was a long version. That was not a nutshell. I'm sorry.
That was perfect because, you know, just people will say, well, it's just salt and water.
Right.
And a lot of times I'll say to them, well, when you cry, what does it taste like? You know, and then they get the correlation. Oh, it's already inside my body. It's already happening, but now you get to take it that further step.
Right. Well, your tears are salt and water, and they don't taste like ASEA.
No.
And you know, it's a very, you know, salient point. I mean, there's all these things like you don't get 31 patents on salt water and so forth. But and you make a good point. You can taste it and tell that it's not salt water. You know, even when you first start drinking it, it tastes like swimming pool water. It doesn't taste like salt water.
Yeah.
And the point of understanding is that Dr. Samuelson gave me this. He's taught me so many things that just, you know, it takes me a while to get it, and then my consciousness expands around it. He said, Lorianne, we are 73% seawater. Our cells are full of salt water. And every reaction in our body takes place in the medium of salt water. So you think about your stomach with the high acid, and our brain with the cerebrospinal fluid, you know, the digestive tract further down with all the different enzymes and so forth, and the different pH shifts in the intestines and so forth. All of it, every cell is full of seawater, and the reactions take place in salt water, including the production of these redox signaling molecules. But, you know, you can, I mean, not that you want to spend this much time talking to somebody who's got this distorted point of view if they're just being negative, you know. If they really want to understand, you could. You know, you can, well, let's look at the genetic study is the easy way to think of that. I was going to say you could drink the salt water and then ASEA and you see the difference. But, you know, one of the things I love about ASEA, and probably most people do, is they're so devoted to good science and demonstrating what these products are and what they really do. And, you know, there's so much research that they've done that's so exciting. The latest that came out in October was these genetic studies that they looked at 5 out of our 30,000 genes. And then they gave these people the mean age of whom was 35. So mean is the middle of the range of the people they tested. So younger people and older people. And that's important because a lot of people think, oh, this is just for old people. And it's not. The mean age was 35. At any rate, they gave them 8 ounces of ASEA a day for 8 weeks, and it turned on the genetic expression of these 5 genes from anywhere from 20 to 31%. And they compared it to the saltwater solution that they start with when they make ASEA. And again, there was a 20 to 31% difference within that 8-week period. That tells you right there, that's not salt water. The salt water did not turn on those 5 genes. So that's, you know, that's a bunch of responses to people saying, oh, it's just salt water.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much. We have like 4 minutes left. Do you want to tell us? I loved that you told me right before you got on this call that you've had the most horrific day. You had 15 minutes. You didn't get any food today. You just said, I drank
That's not entirely true. Between patients, I stuffed something in my face.
You did. You stuff a little bit. But
well, you know, that really does speak to, number one, how much I love these products. And you may have noticed, I love talking about this stuff. It just fluffs my pillow. I get excited because there's never been anything like this. It literally never has. And the other thing is I applied it to my face and drank probably 6 ounces, 8 ounces. And I feel great.
Yeah. And you look just fresh as can be, like you just sat in that chair all day, right?
Whatever, Laurie.
Well, we appreciate you so much. Thank you for taking the time to be with us.
Great pleasure and a great honor. You guys have got the best of the best. Lorianne Garner is the most wonderful person in all of ASEA as far as I'm concerned. She is just a sweetheart, and she's talented and brilliant and knows this stuff. And my gosh, you guys probably know, she can tell stories that will just blow your socks off. So you guys did good. You got a good sponsor. Whatever she says, you do it. There's your finger whipping, right?
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. We'll
You're
say
very
bye
welcome.
to everybody. Bye.
All right. We'll see you
Bye,
guys.
Aaron.